You gotta understand, the enemy's not the man, it's the mindset. Killing my people that's in a similar to COVID. No sense, how you take a life without a motive? Tired of seeing protest, dying to see progress. For the person that'll win in the end, doesn't really matter what's the color of the skin. When the bullets scatter, when they bleed from within, haven't we shed more blood than these tears?
NECIC, back in January, seems like 5,000 years ago now, put out or commissioned or published a really good, very deep survey on life in Mansfield, especially as it pertains to blacks, American Indians, Hispanics, Latinos, Asians. One of the key recommendations that they came at the end with was, and I'll read directly from their survey, increase pre- and post-secondary educational attainment of African Americans with an urgent focus on men. How do we do that?
I would say it starts at the top and trickle down. I mean, politically, spiritually, in every aspect of life.
And I can't necessarily speak, but I would also say make it relative to them. Because we're teaching things like we talked about that before, where there's no relatively, Marquis said it to it. It's not relative to what he is learning or whatever, but there's so many things that would be relative. Like, it's not a hard thing to change how we teach education. I remember, like, my son wasn't fond of reading, so then I just said, every day after school, like, we all sit at the table to study. Read whatever you want. Bring a comic book to the table and then discuss it with me. And then I started making sure I bought like series of books and things that he liked. I remember when I was trying to teach him geometry and we did some stuff with like a basketball, understanding the court, making shapes that he filled, but just make it relative to them. I think we're so afraid to create things that are relative to them. The other things I think that we need to do in schools is realistically, the school system should look like the population of kids that you're serving. If 29% of those kids are African American males in the building, you need to have 29% African male educators. Because I do believe that where commonality exists, it fosters a better environment. So I think we need to take a look at some of those things.
I would like to say as well, I became a better man when I submitted my whole life and became more submissive in my home and allowed my wife to be the woman, that she is in my life, right now.
Say it louder.
And even back then, for a black man, we got to get honest with ourselves. Because there ain't no sympathy in this world. I don't want sympathy from nobody, because there ain't no such thing as sympathy in this world. Now, I can deal with your empathy because you're going to allow me to share my experiences with you, and you will be there in your empathy, but you're not going to have no sympathy for me. You're not going to be sorry, for me, because I don't feel sorry for myself. So why would I expect anyone else to feel sorry for me? And in truth, I don't feel sorry, for myself. So, it's time, for us as men to man up. Because ain't nothing this man can take from me, that I don't allow him to take from me. The black man, I don't think the black man or any other man deserve, a pity party. I don't want no one to feel sorry, for me. But I know my life got better, when my wife, put her foot down, and brought that accountability in my life. I'm living my best life ever. And guess what? It's not because of Bruce Bond. It's because of my beautiful wife.
So how do we take that? How do we take the folks in this room? We've all got these homes. We know these things. How do we take this and expand on it? I mean, how do we grow? We can throw the pond in the water and we get a little pool that goes out. How How do we grow this?
Each one teach one. Each one leads by example. You know, the best lead is example. It's not what you say, man, it's what you do. You know, because we can sit here and have a dialogue, you know, about these things, you know, until tomorrow this time. But if you're not going to walk out of this room and let your next lead be your example, it's a waste of time.
The other thing, I think when we were on break, you also said that, you know, after we leave this room, you also wanted to continue to maintain connections with the people in this room. I think that that's vital. I also think the other part is I think it's that same thing I said. If we're teaching and learning from everybody in interaction, like realizing like the important piece that everybody brings to the table, and that's what elevates us up in a ton of different ways. Like I always, you know, Nelson Mandela said this powerful thing. He said that education is the most powerful tool to change history or to change anything. And each of us come collectively from a different education or a different level, but education is more than book sense. It's more than anything. It's your life story. It's that story that you gave us from Tennessee. It's the story that I got from, you know, growing up in a rural area. It's your story of being in a high school and seeing. It's Beth's situation from what she watched. It's Marquis's situation. But all of that is like this amazing education. If we allow ourselves, like you said, Mr. Bond, if we allow ourselves to just engage, grow from that, gain something from it, that's the tool. That's what will change what's taking place now. But we have to collectively like use our voices to do it. We have to continue these conversations. And just like you said, you're never afraid to call someone out. I'm never afraid to call someone out in your environments when we have to call somebody out, as uncomfortable as that gets for all of us. To do it. And so it has to keep happening. We have to keep having these exchanges. We have to be more than just somebody we did this video on. We have to see each other in the store and not later just go, it's like, no, Marquis, I remember you. Hey, what's going on? What's happening? Exchange, you know, like Beth, I talk to her all the time, so we can, but you know, it's one of those things. It's just, it really does. It has to be, you know, remember who Chris is. If there's something that needs to be reached out from another student or somebody I know, or they're at, you know, look him up, you know, find him, but keep that going. I think that's what has to do, and we all have to keep learning from it.
And one of the things we have to admit, you know, there is some things that I know, and there is some things, you know, that I don't know, and we have to be man enough to admit the things that we don't know. There are some things I know, and there is some things that I know that I know that I know that I don't know. You know, so we're all at the crossroad, you know, of relearning some things. You know, a whole lot of things that I thought I knew, I got to let that stuff go, out with the old and in with the new. And I think, you know, that's where we're at.
You know, we are so far past the days of Brown versus Topeka Board of Education. We're past the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Why hasn't it changed? Is it better? Has it gotten worse? Are we making progress? Why hasn't some of the great struggles of the past held on to today?
Because people are holding on to vested interest. But look, man, it feels good, man, when you think that you're sitting up here on top of the world with all of this power that you think you have that you don't have, because inevitably speaking, in the fullness of time, you're going to lose it. So it's vested interest. It's people not willing to let go.
I wondered if it was, like my dad was a civil rights fighter, and then I came, so I'm a Gen Xer. And I just felt like my grandfather was a sharecropper. So it was one of those things. So he was afraid when my dad and those guys were fighting. When it was time for us to come along and like say things, I remember my dad just being like, hey, we did that already, just be nice. So I kind of feel like people in my generation, I'm almost 50, like we just decided to just be polite and just be quiet. And maybe we were too nice. So then when the millennials started shaking it up a little bit, everybody's like, shh, shh, shh. But no, they really needed to say something. And then we have this Gen Zers who take nobody's anything. Like that is just, it's to the walls.
We screwed it up enough.
Yes.
I mean, just literally, you know, folks, we need a planet. I mean, just we all have to be practicing some common sense and and that's just the thing, is like taking the politics out of it, even though that's all utterly impossible, but we have to be adamant as much as we can where we have to make dramatic changes in our curriculum. For example, just to keep it focused on what you asked specifically, it's all interconnected, and people need to be able to create support in the folks who are going to step forward in doing it. And for example, there's a number of major universities across, like the UC school system in California. They decided this year they're not going to use ACTs or SATs. No more testing for access. And the radicalness of that, people, because we get a system and we want to stay with it. Dialogue is critical, but how do we translate, dialogue and new experiences into the hard work of policy and systemic change with folks who care not at all about what we're saying? I think that's the hard part, is like this assumption that folks are open to it and ready to do it. And that's the hard part about like the education. That's for me, I just always go back to history. The history that we do not know will destroy us, period. And that's the thing we're experiencing now because we don't have that picture from the beginning. And it's not like, even if you present someone with information, what is it? It's about a typical 20 to 25% of folks will change their mind or their attitude in any way based on just new information. So that's why, though, if we start providing this new information at younger ages more critically, and we look at our words and we think about it, but we are ready to embrace curricular change. Because we may be talking about it in this room, but so far, systemically, in this community, in Richland County at least, people have just lost their minds about just talking openly about racism. And we're here because because Black men are being murdered, because Black folks are being murdered by our systems that are supposed to support and protect us. And we can get away from that really quickly. And I think that's the thing that I want to do, because I'm like, if we do better education and we create better, relationships with people, then maybe we don't have to spend a whole lot of time wondering why a whole history of white supremacy packed into a few moments, saves my life, but not your life, Crystal, in that critical moment of privilege. But, just all things are interconnected. And I just have faith that we can be smarter. We can hold two ideas in our head and they don't equal, panic, because that's the thing, is like we get this one idea. It's like America can be great and it can be awful. It's both those things, and we can do that. So I want to support that critical thinking, and I want to do it systemically where, we think out when we leave here, how are we going to make changes to the curriculum, and how are we going to support teachers in being able to handle that curriculum in multiple ways? How do we think radically differently before we're really sitting around going, what have we done?
Because it's fear. I think that's the thing. Like, everybody's afraid. Like, my grandfather was afraid when they moved at Fort. My dad was afraid if we make too much noise that you back it up. We sometimes get afraid, because I remember when I start hearing the voices of like some Z's, I'm like, oh, that's so radical, because those signs are pretty sturdy, and what they're saying, what they're saying. And I loved having the conversation with the young girls who did the peace movement and did the thing, and they were just like, I'm just going to start saying to my grandparents something different. But it's fear. So I think fear backs it up, because I would be willing to ask Chris that. Understanding how you feel as a leader in your school, but if you went in there and said tomorrow and had to tell your whole curriculum department that you wanted to change that history and how that looks, like, what does that look like? And is that fearful for you, having those conversations with teachers, parents, educators?
It's definitely going to make people uncomfortable. Yeah. I mean, and I think it's just, it was larger than just Ontario High School. It's the state. It's what we're being, I don't want to say guess mandated, but told to teach, and there lacks creativity and critical thinking and those types of things that are extremely important, along with knowledge of, and I just feel we're raising a generation that can't think for themselves. That's my biggest fear. That critical thinking piece is huge. You find so many young people that are so emotional, but they don't know why they're emotional. and they aren't able to connect feelings and understanding and knowledge and rationalize all that, if that makes sense.
And I
So
would
it's all
even say,
tied together, I guess.
yeah, and it really, I would even ask him the same, even in higher education, like how scary would that be if you had to go in and tell everybody in your, right, we should toss all of this out.
If I had any power, it would be great.
Yeah.
But, you know, the power I have does not necessarily translate into my job. I mean, I try my own little way to introduce my students who are typically pretty upper class white, because we have a huge like equestrian program, which, as I'm sure you know, involves a lot of money. I try to jostle their perspectives as often as I can. But if our entire university had to suddenly kind of recommit itself to a more vocally anti-racist pedagogy, I think there would be a lot of confusion and a lot of fear. I would welcome it. I'm not necessarily independent from my students in that I don't also fear learning, because learning is really difficult and full of pain. And I don't like pain, just as like a general stimulus responsive being. But that's a challenge that I think has nothing but rewards behind it overall. But a thing that seems to be swirling around here too is this idea of modeling, because there are at least two levels on which this kind of change can enact itself, and we're talking a lot about the systemic change, which is enormously important and takes a long time because it's like turning around a battleship, right? Trying to make a U-turn, and that absolutely needs to happen. But I really was resonating with what you were saying, Bruce, about manning up by being more vulnerable. I love just the way that the language is working there, because when somebody normally says man up, it typically involves some sort of reference to the genitals that isn't really great for polite company and is potentially misogynist, all this kind of stuff, right? But looking for the more submissive, softer, more open side of masculinity, I think is definitely a component here. Just overall, that's part of the intersection of these experiences. So I was really happy that you said that. And I think that's a thing that we should also be modeling for our young male students wherever we can, whoever we come into contact with, and encouraging wherever it is. Because I think that openness to new mindsets, new information, to learning that you have so proudly exhibited is really essential for change overall, right? And I imagine that's part of like the 25% who, with new information, change their minds. That's part of it.
It's one thing that's relevant to all of us that has assembled and gathered ourselves in this room today, and that's motivation. Motivation. Why do we do what we do? Every human being should be able to answer that one question in honesty and in truth. What motivates you to do the things that you do on a daily basis, towards your fellow man? What's your motivation? Why do I do what I do? I do that of which I do because I believe 110% at the end of the day that I can make a difference in another human being's life. If I didn't believe I can make a difference in another human being's life, I wouldn't be sitting here in the midst of any of you today, because it would be just a waste of my time, and I don't have time to waste. I believe that every human being that sits in this room today is here because we really want to vest in coming up with an answer that's going to impact this community in such a way that at the end of the day that all of us will be the blessed and the better, opposed to the cursed and the worst. I believe that.
Marquis, I want to ask you to speak on behalf of anybody but yourself, but what do you think and what do you feel as you sit here tonight and you hear this discussion, and as someone who's closer to younger people than I am, well, everybody in the room is closer to younger people than I am. So, I mean, what motivated you beyond school? How did you get past the snares and the roadblocks and the systemic things people put in your path? How did you do it?
I think it was more like Brother Bond said, just by being vulnerable and opening up. So I was taught to not be afraid to talk to anybody. So whenever I felt like I come up in a roadblock, and I think it may have been, say, sort of like maybe I was going up for a job interview or something like that. Now maybe I was already at a disadvantage being a young black man. I always was open about and wanted the person that maybe was interviewing me to ask me any question that they felt was relevant to what position that I was applying for, or I just always wanted to be vulnerable and just open up and create relationships with people, because I think that's what helped propel me to even on the path I am today, just by being able to create relationships and not being stuck in a box of just saying of my black peers or anything, by just being able to be diverse in my relationships. So that has really helped me to move forward, and just being able to not be afraid to network with all types of people from all different walks of life, and just creating that, keeping that line of communication open. Wherever I go, if I come into a grocery store or something like that, and just speaking to somebody just randomly and if I stop for a 2 or 3 minute conversation, just about something random, and it doesn't matter how they look or how they smell or anything like that. It just, I was being motivated, like he said, to just want to make a difference. I know I was put on this earth to do greater things, so I know I want to be able to make a difference in somebody's life. So that was motivate me. That's always motivated me since I was younger. So I think that's what really helped me to be able to move forward and not really face a lot of those roadblocks, because I may have been come from a different background and place. So I think that has really helped me to be here.
How do we take this example and multiply it by 1,000? How do we grow that? I mean, let me back up for just 1 second. What motivated you at a young age?
So just knowing what I wanted to do, just really being there, having a sense of what I wanted to do with my life. And I think what a lot of young kids nowadays are missing is that vision, because a lot of them don't have nobody at home telling them or encouraging them to think about what it is that they want to be. So, and they're not really as open in communicating as like maybe my generation, the millennials are. These generations of Z, like she said, are just more like they not taking nothing from nobody, and they just stuck in this box right here. So I think the only way, the way that we can help them is by being just more open, keeping those lines of communication open with them, and being more relative to them in anything that we're teaching them, because they feel like if this and they're not benefiting directly from it, and they don't think if they can see results from it right now, that it's not for them. So I think that if we, as in our positions as educators, just be able to be more relative in our communication and whatever the system that we're trying to implement on them, I think it'll be way more beneficial, and we would be able to impact a lot more numbers in young folks, and being more open and as far as what's going on in today's society.
You see, we have to learn how to support one another, and that's all of us, because, when I ride down Park Avenue, it's a good day for me when I see the 419. I'm very proud of Damien. I'm very proud of you, young man. I'm very proud of you young guys, and what I have to do, my responsibility is to keep leading by example. Because I've been out here on this battlefield, man, for a long time. I've been a community activist for a long time. But I don't do it for pompous or to win a popularity contest. I don't want nobody plaques and certificates. I don't need that to do what I do, because my motivation is pure. So I'm very proud of you young guys. So it's gonna take more men, such as myself, manning up, and really giving it up to you guys and leading by example, man, and empowering you to be your best every day.
I think the other thing that it takes is for other people to see you as the conversation that you've had. I don't think that most Caucasian men or women would see him as being vulnerable and soft and open to learning, or you even saying that, you know, there's a different kind of thing they sell about black men and their masculinity. And that was nothing that either one of you expressed here today. So if more people, I think, looked at younger men of color and saw them as somebody as open as him, wanting to learn, wanting to exchange, I even feel like the education process would be different, because I've worked in that, and I'll be honest in saying, like, some of the things that I saw in education were shocking, because you think that where people are educated, they would treat people better, and there would be it's some shocking things that take place that are frightening. But just that, if we all could see that, if everybody could walk through a store and see a young man wearing red tennis shoes and a red shirt, and, oh, maybe it's a gang, you know, it's blood, you know, they come up with these crazy things instead of maybe red's his favorite color, but he's really, you know, let's have that conversation, you know, looking at you and saying that you found these gifts that you learned from your wife, and that would be so different, as opposed to just assuming that you're this domineering, you know. But if we could just see people.
I wouldn't be a third of the man if I am today if it was not, you know, for my wife. I wouldn't be a third of the man today I am if it was not, you know, for Marquis, if it was not, you know, from Dame. If I'm catching the moment, I can come to the 419 and get some dialogue. I really can. You know, I have came to the 419, you know, and got some dialogue, you know, from Dame. You know, very positive young man, very powerful young man. You know, I'm passing the baton. They got to put in the work. I'm just here to lead by example and to encourage and to empower them to do the work.
And that's one. I'm like, while I'm still talking, I also say it even falls on us to do the same thing too. Like when I first met Beth, I wouldn't have known who she was. When she first started speaking, we were doing this women's conference, and I was like, oh, you know, then those things resonated. I wouldn't, if I saw you on the streets, I wouldn't know that you advocated for better literacy. I would not know that you wanted more critical thinking. And, you know, we don't even know that these things. So sometimes I think not just with the way that we look at them, I can speak to that because I am a woman of color who knows that I've been judged in those ways. But even us looking at someone like you, knowing that you are an ally and you are an ally of things that we want, I think that's what we all have to do.